Lights on. Oh boy, here we go again. And I was just thinking of doing a regular video tonight, or today. Seems like Mother Nature had other plans. Because, well, in case anyone missed the thumbnail here, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Severe weather sequence here has taken quite the turn here. Look at this. 5 days of severe risk. Some of these varying in significance here, but a lot going on here from Wednesday all the way through the weekend here, culminating with these currently enhanced risks. Questionable as to whether or not we see any sort of uptrending here. We'll have to see how things progress with that as we go forward here. But we're going to get into the latest with the model data here. We should have just about all the model data we need from the medium range here. The short range models are just a little too far out for Friday right here. I think we could look at the Wednesday and Thursday time frames with the convective models, but these 3 days are still a question right now. But just a sign of the times ahead here. It's springtime and we are being reminded very quickly. I hope you guys are doing well. It's Tuesday, March 11th. And just as you said, Torex, it is going to be a very long weekend. So I guess we'll start with Wednesday here from this point. No severe risk tonight, which is great. We're going to take a little bit of that time to kind of rest just a bit. Go easy. But Wednesday and onward, game on, it seems. So this is what we got for Wednesday here. We got a slight risk. This is over towards pretty familiar territory. We were live the other week covering some of this area. We ended up kind of having to pass on this area. We weren't thinking that severe weather was going to push this far to the east last week, but it looks like this area is under the gun yet again. Anyone that's southeast of Tulsa needs to be paying close attention to this area. We have Dallas involved also. We have Shreveport. We also have Richardson, Garland, Plano in there as well. So some pretty notable population centers in there. Main threat is damaging winds, and there's actually a hatched risk for hail. I think this is our first hatched risk for hail this year. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that, of course. Damaging wind threat is going to be notable. We might stream this tomorrow just for fun. It'll be probably one of the least serious streams we have for a bit, but then again, you never know. Even I've seen plenty of 2%er days become something a little bit more significant. So those non-zero tornado threat days are always going to have to be something to keep an eye on. In fact, that'll be the voting poll. Yeah, great example of that in Florida, actually. Great example of a 2%er event being of significance was in Florida. There was an EF2 tornado that touched down in South Florida. It was only a marginal risk, 2% tornado threat. So, again, like I said, we'll probably be live trying to cover that. If nothing else, I might go do a throwback for the OGs here and do a hail stream, possibly. Timing is really going to be a big factor with that. Anyway, though, let's go into the marginal risk. This is the least impressive of the days so far. There's no clear hazard type with this at the moment, but even so, I do think with this setup, we may also have that 2% threat. Yeah, it definitely kind of reminded me of last year, that tornado in Florida yesterday. Like, Florida was probably the biggest overperformer throughout the year. Like, there were so many different tornado events then without the tropical assistance that we had from Milton, for example. Like, Florida, I think, might have been among the top 5 most active states when all was said and done as far as tornado count was concerned. Making a voting poll real quick while I'm moving forward here, because from this point, this is where the game really begins to change. So here's our day 4 threat right now. Big time severe weather setup. They've actually expanded this area further off to the north here. I was kind of expecting a little bit of a downtrend here. It seems like they've gone the other way with it in the SPC here, so a little bit of a surprise. But in any case, though, we're going to be watching, of course, this 30% area, which they've also expanded up to the north. Kind of retracted a little bit off to the south here. The biggest fail mode that I've been talking about, and we talked about in a little bit greater detail yesterday, was going to be potential for lack of moisture. However, to go against that, and not saying that I'm rooting for the event to perform big, but I remember around this time last year, the area was further off towards east around Ohio, the Ohio Valley. The moisture return was very questionable all the way up until the last day. And then all of a sudden, towards southwest Ohio, we had those dew points in the 60s, and we had pretty much a small scale, medium scale tornado outbreak there. So, just goes to show that just because we're seeing a trend on models doesn't mean it is always set in stone here. Just like in the long range, you see a crazy moist sector. Sometimes it can downtrend, just like we've seen here. Yep, we were live that whole weekend. I have not forgotten either. But yep, March 13th through the 15th. In any case, though, as you can see, might have a bimodal setup depending on how things trend here. So we go to day 5. This actually includes my area. And if you're wondering, yes, I'm in the orange. I'm kind of excited. Hey, what's up, APT? Hi, Mia. So, as far as Saturday's threat, been a lot of talk. I've already seen it, Mia. I already know you're in it. As far as day 6 is concerned, the entire state of Alabama now is involved. We have eastern parts of Mississippi. We have Atlanta, Columbus, Georgia in there as well. Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have southeastern Tennessee involved. And maybe even sneaking into the northern and northeasternmost parts, or southeasternmost parts of North Carolina involved as well. Excuse me. Now the slight risk, however, is now stretched all the way up towards the Great Lakes at this point. So, very familiar area over here towards Ohio. I think that's an area people are sleeping on as well. We're going to be watching that, of course. And then over towards the Gulf states, we're going to be watching that super close too. So, depending on how that warm sector verifies, that could be pretty telling of what we end up getting as well. Then we get towards day 6. We have yet another slight risk issue. And now we have the Mid-Atlantic, we have the Carolinas involved, and the East Coast as a whole. Stretches all the way into Philadelphia, through Baltimore, D.C., Richmond, Virginia Beach, all the way through the eastern half of North Carolina, almost all of South Carolina involved there as well. Southern Georgia and the Florida Panhandle is a point of interest. By the time we get into the following day, mercifully, I would say even, that the storm system leaves and potential for severe weather finally will drop off. But just goes to show how busy this weekend could be. And then just as a whole here's the it's just madness whenever you see the Weather Prediction Center do something like this. Look at all of the madness here. There's potential for severe weather. There's heavy rain and flooding. There's winter weather. There's heavy snow. There's high winds. There's fire danger. Just there's a whole lot of stuff going on across the lower 48 as a whole. If we actually go back to the Storm Prediction Center, take a look at this as well. I don't really cover fire weather as much, but there are 5 days in a row of critical fire risk. There are a couple of days here where there may even be concerns for extreme fire weather. And this is also due in large part to the same storm system that's prompted all of these slight risk and above, which is wild to say the least. This storm system as a whole is going to be in the, I think from what I saw in the last model run here, we were in the 970s in regards to pressure, which is still the equivalent of a Cat 2 hurricane. So there's going to be strong winds across the board regardless of whether you do or don't get severe weather. Being in the mid-latitudes. Yeah, you're most likely going to get wind towards your area, Mia. I would say that you're most likely going to get wind, but nothing guaranteed at this point. I would mainly hope for wind given the situation anyway. So, that being said, let's go ahead and get into the GFS here. We'll also make a comparison with the Euro too. In fact, Go ahead and open that window while we're at it. And perfect timing too, because the Euro just finished uploading not long ago. The biggest issue that I have with the daylight savings time is and it's like what I was talking about earlier. It kind of throws off the timing for the videos here. The weather models don't really adjust to daylight savings time. They don't go by the rules there. So have to continually try to keep track of when these upload here. The goal here is always to give you the most up-to-date info. In any case, let's keep it moving here. You regret wishing for no more snow and wanting storms instead. I feel like there's going to be quite a few people that might feel that way after this, regardless of whether they get severe weather or not. But in any case, we're going to look at both these models from beginning to end at this point. I mean, I have mixed feelings about daylight savings, me personally. I mean, there's some good aspects to it, and I can see it, and then there's some bad ones to go with it. So it's you give something to get something. That's how I look at it. Oh, by the way, here's the voting poll, and let's go ahead and get that going here. Boom. There's Euro. We're going to shrink that down just a tiny bit. I got a better idea. Let me do a little thing here as well. That way we can make this a little bit larger. Alright. That being said, here we go. So we'll start out with GFS. We're going to be starting with our Wednesday event. Oops. We're at single image mode. We need a loop. I understand you. I understand, Emmanuel. I hate giving up the hour of sleep. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is giving up that extra hour of sleep. Especially since I already have trouble sleeping as it is. Alright. So trough number 1, this is going to be our feature that causes the first slight risk, and then also the marginal risk to follow here. So initiation time probably would be right at about sunset, maybe just a little bit before. So I would say about somewhere between 4 and 7 p.m. Central Time is when these storms will begin to fire here. We'll see things kind of ramp up as we get later into the evening, and we'll watch this eventually transition off to the east here, where we see pretty much a repeat from the looks of it based on the models for the 13th here. Early afternoon event. Not expecting a whole lot out of that, but even so, I think non-damaging windstorm, possibly even a tornado, could be in the cards. It's questionable still at this point here. And then here we go. This is where we get to the main event here, looking at the 500 here. This is our amped up, negatively tilted trough that is really starting to wrap up by this time frame here. Pressure is really starting to drop off, especially in the upper levels here. You can tell by these contour lines and how tightly wrapped up they are. Seems like there's going to be a lot more forcing, and I think that's why they went with the enhanced risk further to the north. To the south here, it does look like forcing's a little bit weaker. The question is, if we can still get moisture to these regions up in the north, it could be, like I said before, bimodal outbreak things do end up verifying over here. And then here is where things get interesting for Saturday. We watch this trough move out, kind of decay a little bit, and then we see a reinforcing trough follow up here. And this is where our severe weather threat for Saturday comes into play here. Really well set up. Also pretty broad trough here. Very strong as well, with a nice little jet streak. No, you may not get something, Isaiah. I'm going to be rude. I'm just kidding. It's kind of hard to say at this point. I think it's still possible. But all joking aside, though, because now we're even talking about my area at this point, you can see a lot of forcing in this area, so I do think it could be a bimodal sphere. Not bimodal, but convective mode could be prefrontal cells with ultimately a QLCS coming in later in the evening. But in any case, though, we'll watch this trough exit out on Saturday, and then on Sunday, this is where we start to see the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic coming into play. I do think that this will be probably an early afternoon threat. By the time we get later into the evening, this line, what I would expect to be a line of storms, would be moving offshore by this point here. And then from that point, we do look like we get at least a little bit of a brief break in the action here, at least until the 20th. Then after that, we might have to be watchful of yet another system. And after that, oh dear. With all that's been going on, I haven't really gotten a great look at some of the future model data here, especially as we get towards the 25th and beyond. That's an interesting look for sure. We'll have to watch that real close, but obviously past 300 hours, we're not going to put a lot of merit into it. But in any case, though, it does look like the pattern still might have more in store for us to end out March. But in any case, though, let me actually go back. And we'll kind of zoom in a little bit on the 14th and onward, because obviously those are our days of greatest concern here. That's what most of you are probably here for. Okay, so we're at 21Z with the GFS here. We're going to do the same thing with the Euro now. So this is what the Euro is looking like, and I do think it kind of favors that southern mode here. There are a couple key features that I'm really latching on to with these two as far as the discrepancy is concerned. For one, Euro's not quite as wrapped up. Trough evolution is pretty much identical here. But notice that the track of the low has varied a little bit now. GFS here, as you can see on the screen, is over towards northeastern Kansas, whereas this trough is kind of leaning towards central Kansas, maybe even southern Kansas at this point. And you would think, okay, that's not that significant of a difference here. I'm telling you, wind shear profile changes significantly, and the convective mode changes just based off of this little difference between these two. This would lean into a more southern this would lean into a slightly better southern event, and this would kind of lean a little bit more towards a northern event. The southern mode still could be pretty impressive here, but there are a lot of questions, of course, regarding that as well. Then we're going to move into Saturday here. We're going to move GFS. And then, of course, this looks like peak time in the 500 millibar range. This is the upper air map, by the way. Same thing with the Euro. Reinforcing trough comes in. Timing is a tad bit different with the Euro. It's leaning a little bit more into the overnight. But even so, it does look pretty similar in regards to what the main has would be. I would be expecting a QLCS prefrontal cells possible, especially over towards Alabama. I'm very interested in that area and seeing what happens with that. Even a little bit of concern does exist with it as well. But like I said, no guarantees with that area. It's not a shoe-in, but definitely something we're going to have to be watching super close. And then here's that new slight risk for Saturday, which we're going to be watching as well. I wouldn't say that now. Let me go back here and show you. Is Macon going to be a lot of tornadoes? No, Macon is not guaranteed to see tornadoes. You do need to be on the watch for it, though, just in case. I mean, you're going to be right on the edge of the enhanced risk here. I do think these winds are going to be pretty strong regardless. Tornadoes are not guaranteed, though. So I definitely urge you to stay tuned here, Renita. But yeah, you have an opportunity. So yeah, I know you're always prepared. Speaking of which, I'll chat with you about something a little bit later after the stream. Yep, you saying it always misses. Famous last words, anyone? But anyway, though, does look like by the time we get towards mid to late afternoon Sunday is when we start to get some initiation for Sunday's event. Euro is a little bit more uncertain with this. Not as much confidence, but it does look like we have a chance of things kind of lingering, maybe even into Monday based off of the Euro. It's just really questionable as to whether or not either one of these ends up verifying. Just being so far in range is always challenging when it comes to forecasting. Hey, G bro. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into 700 here. So, quick look at Wednesday real quick here. I already have my days screwed up from all the weather we're already talking about. Here's our shortwave for Wednesday. This is where Dallas gets into the action here. Be on the lookout for some large hail, of course. Oh wow, thank you, Renita. Yes, I will absolutely be live. I don't know how early I'll be live for Friday. Hopefully I'll be on early, but I will undoubtedly be live Saturday. I actually live not too far north from you. I live in Atlanta, so I'm what? Chill out, Isaiah. But yeah, I will be live. No need to be nervous. We'll get you through it. I promise you that much. We'll get you through it. But yeah, we cover severe weather events very often here, especially if my work schedule permits, which honestly, this kind of falls perfectly. Shoot, if I had my own vehicle running right now, I'd actually be able to do some storm spotting on this, which we'll talk about that later, Manuel. I think you know what that means. In any case, though, oh, well, thank you for tuning in also. Okay, so Euro's kind of against Wednesday here. Let's go into Thursday. Pretty much a similar deal. Not a super pronounced shortwave until we get later in the evening again. Euro's kind of leaning more towards Alabama having the better shortwave, better point of lift. Whereas we're kind of seeing it in both Alabama and Georgia here. So this corridor in particular is what's kind of captured my eye in either one of these scenarios here. There is a little shortwave that kind of pops up later. Wind energy is a little bit better on GFS though. And then here we go. This is where the sequence starts to really peak at this point. We of course have strong winds in the mid-levels. We're really looking for a shortwave at this point. And eventually we do start to see it come into play here as we get later into the evening. I do think we're kind of trending more towards an overnight event for Friday. So, like I said, a lot of questions remain with that. If we can get the moisture to match up, we could be in business towards this northern mode. I do think that southern mode gets better as we get into the overnight too. So it's not over for the region yet either. Over towards the Mississippi Delta. Nice. Glad to have you here. Glad to have all the help I could get, because could be a long weekend, could be a bust, or it could be madness. Sorry to hear about your drone, by the way, Emmanuel. So keep moving forward. this is where we get into Saturday's threat. Here's our reinforcing trough. Really prominent shortwave pops up by the time we get towards sunset for the deep south. Euro's in a pretty similar spot. Kind of fires off a little earlier from the looks of it too. There's a couple of different areas of interest. One, of course, being towards central Alabama, parts of northwest Georgia, and then southern Alabama here as well. I think this corridor off to the south here is where the threat for even violent tornadoes would be possible at this point. I don't even know if Dixie has a script, honestly, Torex. She just does what she wants. If she's ready to go crazy, she's going to go crazy. And there's not a thing you can do about it. And it gets scary when she does that. Trust me, I should know. I'm a Dixie Alley resident. But when she doesn't feel like it, she's just going to break a lot of people's hearts. Alright, so I'm looking for short waves on Sunday now. Euro's not really giving me a whole lot there. Like I said, I don't know if the Euro's fully on board with it. Whereas the GFS kind of gives me a little something over towards the Carolinas first. And then eventually, as we get later into the afternoon, we start to see that area over towards Virginia. And I think that would be the time when our storms would fire over there. And this would also progress its way through Maryland and Delaware, maybe even towards Pennsylvania, Philly in particular, before all is said and done here. Alright, getting into the low-level jet now. So we're just about done with our shear environment at the very least. So what I'm looking for is, we're, of course, starting with Wednesday here. Profile's not really good for tornadoes, but good for hail at the very least. We go later into Thursday here. Not much in the way of low-level shear available, which is going to help keep that tornado threat low. But damaging wind gusts definitely seem like they would be possible Thursday. We get into Friday. Of course, we already know the situation here. Look at this little pocket here where we're getting into 60 knots plus over here towards the south side of St. Louis. Definitely need to be watchful of this region. I think the GFS has actually become the more aggressive of the two models as far as our low-level jet is concerned. It's a little bit more bountiful, but that's partially due to the low being stronger in this run compared to this run. But in either case, though, there is a nasty little corridor, or nasty few corridors over here where we have really strong LLJ. And then as we get later into the evening, that's when the Euro really kicks in. In either case, though, I think early evening, maybe overnight setup would come into play here. If we can get some storms to fire early, it could change the game also. Oh, trust me, I know. I lived through it. I lived through April 27th. We don't talk about that day much. Not here, at least. I'll tell you guys a little story about that maybe towards the end of the stream if there's enough of you hanging around. I'll tell you my experience. I didn't get hit by a tornado, but it was really something. Especially since that was one of the first events that I'd ever forecasted, long before I even started this YouTube channel. That was the first time I really started, that year was the first time I really started getting into the whole model data like what you're seeing here. Such a crazy memory. That whole 2-week sequence was. Really just that whole month. Okay, so here's a look at the low-level jet for Sunday now. And this is kind of getting exhausting. There's so much to go over. It's one for the ages, man. It really was. But yeah, that low-level jet is still very strong. Not quite as prominent in the way of directional shear, which definitely kind of reinforces that damaging wind threat. But further off towards the east, I do think that a couple tornadoes could be possible. The further off towards the northeast, I would say. So DC area in particular, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Suffolk, those regions there. Maybe just to the east of Charlotte even. So Raleigh could be a point of interest as well. Both models are kind of leaning that way, with the GFS having the slightly better shear profile. And of course, we'll watch these roll out, and we'll be able to finally take a look at our dew points here at this point. Okay, so try to finish this out before we hit an hour on the stream here in regards to the forecasting here. So that way, if anyone wants to chat after that, it's cool. But let's go ahead and get the dew points up for both our models here. Now, this is one feature that I haven't had a chance to really look at also off either of these models. Like I said, the model runs were pretty new when we first started the stream, so I didn't get a lot of time to react to everything. I always go over the wind profile first. So, of course, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm not too concerned about the moisture profile, not anything super impressive. Now, here is the key contingency to all of this, and this is in particular with Friday, especially. So, if I were to go ahead and take a look at the moisture return here, main thing I'm making note of here is there has been a trend, a recurring trend, or a trend that's been intermittent, I should say, even, where we kind of get into those mid-60 dew points over here, then we get into the 60s close to southern parts or southeastern parts of Missouri here. Have seen a slight uptrend over here towards these northern states in regards to moisture. I still think that this might be a limiting factor. However, with this moist sector here, I do still think we're going to have a sufficient amount of instability, and that's going to be enough to get these storms going towards this region here. Now, like I said, model discrepancy is a big issue. And then also, if you caught at the beginning of the stream, I made mention of an outbreak we covered last year over towards Ohio, where we didn't have the best moisture returns. They would be in like the mid-50s, low 50s, like what we were seeing, like what we're seeing here, for example, right now. And then I remember over the course of the day, we ended up seeing model runs push these dew points all the way into the mid-60s, and we had a whole tornado outbreak over here towards the region. And it was a several-day sequence as a result. So, just because you aren't seeing what you're looking for on the models in the medium range does not mean that you can't get a last-minute uptrend here. So, just because you aren't seeing mid-50 dew points over towards this region, just because you're only seeing mid-50 dew points, don't think you're out of the woods yet. Definitely make sure that you're paying close attention, because you won't know, because we aren't going to know until the day of. Alright, let's get into Saturday, and this is where things kind of get interesting here. There has been a small, and I will re-emphasize the words very small, downtrend here in regards to the moisture return. It's not quite as broad as what I had seen previously, but even so, I kind of see a very similar look to that event that I was making mention of, where we would see a slight uptrend with the models here in regards to the moisture return. We end up getting that, you never know. Even up towards Ohio could get into the action once again. So, Manuel, obviously you say you're prepared. I'm going to trust you on that. Right now you're looking like you're going to be on the edge of a slight risk, or maybe even a marginal, but there's always that chance it goes the other way. We'll watch this moisture move out, rebuild, reemerge over the mid-Atlantic by the time we get towards Sunday afternoon. Now, this is the most agreement that I've seen amongst the models for any day right now. There's still questions in regards to whether or not this ends up verifying either, but seeing those mid-60 dew points is enough of a signal for me, I would say. As we get later into the evening, front finally comes through, and we'll see this clear out. Then by the time we get towards Monday afternoon, we're done here with the severe weather threat at long last. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and take a look right at the juicy stuff here, which is the surface cape and the hydrographs. On the Euro, it's a little different. It's mixed layer cape, but instability is instability at the end of the day. Getting a look at both is is paramount, so that way we have a pretty good idea of what the environment is capable of doing here. Keep in mind, we're still pretty far out of range at this point, so a lot of questions still remain with this setup here. Now notice we do get instability towards this region early in the day. The timing factor is what I always have been questioning with this northern mode here. You get some early storms to fire towards this region, which I think is possible. We could get some severe weather. Problem is, during this time frame, storms are likely to be elevated. Moisture returns at this point are kind of mid at, I would say, at this juncture. If we can, however, get anything to root to the surface, especially as we get later into the evening, and we're going to move this forward a few frames here. Maybe, just maybe, you could get a tornado out of that. But with this right here, I would say no. Let me see if I can go a little bit further here, but I'm kind of doubtful. Yep. That's a classic case of having the right kinematics, but the thermodynamics, the instability, the dew points just does not match up here. Now the southern mode, as we get later into the evening, that actually gets better. Take a look at this right here by the time we get into the overnight. This is the southern mode. Boom. Look at the difference. We're going to try to match this up with what we were looking at on the Euro here. I know I got it on the smaller screen here. But yeah, that is a nasty look right there. Got a PDS tornado sounding, so pretty dangerous look over towards the southern mode. Of course, that's the Euro. We'll make a quick comparison here. The northern mode around that same time frame. This is looking a little bit better on GFS in comparison to Euro. Like I said, moisture is going to be the big question, especially in the mid-levels. A lot of mid-level dryness as well. But, like I said, if we can get that storm to root, though, we could get a tornado out of that. Not a strong one from the looks of it, but if we get later into the evening and the environment improves anymore, this is where the threat starts to become a little bit more palpable, because look at how this loops, this low-level heliograph kind of loops outward more. So this is actually a really good sign of strong directional and speed shear at the low levels here. Got to be very watchful of that. Instability is kind of lacking. It would be sufficient enough to get something going. Other issue we have, even though it's slightly more improved, again, it's that mid-level moisture. We don't want them to be directly on top of each other, but the closer that these two are together, the better the mid-levels. You just want a little bit of mid-level dryness, not too much. Now, if we go ahead and go to the southern mode, this is where the greatest concern lies, but notice on the GFS, the instability isn't quite as impressive here. Low level wind shear is not quite as prominent, and as a result, doesn't look quite as good. Storms are a little bit elevated here as well. I think that's due in large part to that feature being a little bit further towards northeastern Kansas instead of southern Kansas. As a result, storms end up being a little bit more elevated. A lot of mid-level dryness. So there's our fail parameters here. There you go. See? Don't sleep on it yet. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the next day here. We're going to get into Saturday at this point. This is the Euro. Euro's not really showing as much in the way of mixed layer cape over towards southern Alabama, which is a bit surprising. A little bit of a downtrend here. Okay sounding on Utah for Thursday. I'm going to check that out in a second. Euro's actually really elevated with this one. That's a surprise. Let's move it to the next time frame here. Ooh, okay. There we go. Instability is not really as good with the euro, but in either case, though, look at this. Look at this loop right here. And this is in particular for all my folks that are a little bit more weather savvy. Look at that 0 to 3 loop right there. Now that is incredible wind shear. The real question that we have, of course, is that instability. Now there's a couple of different failure modes for Saturday that come into play here. For one, cloud cover. Second, over convection or crapvection. But if we can overcome that, ceiling is pretty high towards this region here. Euro's not giving as much lift with this as the GFS though at this range, so a lot of variability there. As we get later into the evening though, it does kind of ramp back up again. I do think there could be even potential for an overnight threat as well. But like I said, a lot of questions still, a lot more questions than answers in regards to Saturday now. Now GFS is really aggressive with instability now. So we're going to probably see some crazy stuff here. There you go. It only took one click to find that. Wow, look at all of the sounding analogs that we're finding here. Okay, wow. So to anyone that's on Discord, we're going to talk about this after the stream is over. There's a couple analogs that I think would really interest you guys. So I'm going to save that sounding. But yeah, this is a pretty nasty look here. There's really good directional shear. So again, over towards Mobile might be a point of interest. I'm thinking that's going to be the hot spot. We'll also kind of look a little further back towards the west, over towards maybe Tupelo, possibly. Wow, Birmingham 98. That's something right there. And it's crazy to think that it does kind of have that look to it. I looked at some of these synoptics for 98 Birmingham. Can't say it'll be a carbon copy of that, but it's not dissimilar, so I'll give him that one. Wow. It's another really good sounding over here. This is over towards Tupelo, so like I said, the potential's there for a significant outbreak. Like I said, the real questions with Saturday really have a lot more to do with instability. Will the air mass recover? I do think it's very possible at this point, but we'll wait. But we're kind of in that wait and see mode still by this juncture. Now, if I were to look over towards my area in the overnight hours, not a whole lot in the way of instability available. But again, the global models like GFS and Euro sometimes can downplay instability. Nonetheless, here, not really giving us much of a chance of severe weather, which I'm not complaining about, truthfully. I do think we'll probably be in a linear mode by the time the storms get towards downtown. Then, for these regions further off towards the south, this will be right around the Macon area. Yes, it does have potential to produce here. Instability, however, at this juncture does look like it's pretty low, which is good news. Shear profile still looks pretty good. Storm does look like it's elevated. Mainly thinking at this point damaging wind threat. Probably going to be doing more live discussions soon to account for any changes that the models may bring over the course of the next 24 hours. Alright, let's get to Sunday now. Not a whole lot in the way of instability. Hodiographs are not looking great. See if the euro is a little bit more generous in the way of instability. Does look like there's some available. We're going to wait and see how this pans out here. Lift index is not great, but there's enough instability and enough of a shear profile over here towards the Carolinas where a tornado threat's possible. Yeah, Carolina might be getting the scraps here. This was over towards North Carolina. I wonder where one of my viewers' ATR is, because this includes his area. So I'm thinking he would be excited because he's always wanting something to happen over there. But this definitely has that look of a linear mode here with potential for a few spin ups for sure. At least according to the Euro. GFS, like I said, is kind of leaning a little against it. There's a couple pockets right here that we would have to watch. But if you find the right spot here, here you go. Look at that. It's good shear in the lower levels. Maybe an embedded supercell possible. Really good cloud bases right here. Lift index is the biggest weakness, however. Again, I'm really thinking it's going to be a linear mode. Lapse rates are not looking great. But in any case, though, we'll have to watch this area. And then we'll see what the mode over towards DC might have to offer. I don't expect much. Instability looks a little bit sparse, but if you could get something going there, oh boy. But also it looks like a nice little capping inversion is about to take shape here by this time frame too. So looks like over towards Baltimore, DC, and maybe even towards Richmond. As of right now, I don't see a clear-cut threat as of yet. Alright. So that's Sunday for us. Watch this clear out. Watch this clear out. We'll take a look at simulated radar, and that's really all we got. Okay. Here's GFS. Here's our storm activity Wednesday night. Not a whole lot, but something to keep an eye on. There is potential for all hazards possible. Really interested in that hail threat in particular. As we get later into the evening on Thursday, see some shower and storm activity towards the deep south. And then here is where things start to take off here. Northern mode does look like it starts to fire as we get later into the afternoon and the evening. Southern mode may end up being overnight here. GFS is kind of leaning against it a little bit. Not the most impressive look that I've seen as far as the reflectivity and the precip type on here at this point. But this could give rise to a stronger Saturday setup. As a result here, we see this line of storms overnight, and all hazards would be possible with this. We'll see this head out and evolve into another line of storms for Sunday as well. Make the comparison to the Euro, and here's where the stark difference is. We see a little bit of morning convection, a nice little MCS pops up in the early morning hours, and we see a secondary group of storms begin to fire. We see a little bit of resurgence towards this region in the afternoon. Still think tornadoes are possible, but I think that early convection could tamper this environment and hamper it down to a point where the threat may end up being mitigated. But it's a tale of two models here. So no guarantees at this juncture. We'll watch the Sunday event take shape here. Looks like it fires later than GFS here. Looks like it leans into a flood threat a bit more. And the other interesting thing to make note of here is the northern mode looks like it fires early in the day. So if you're over towards Philly, might need to keep an eye on that. And then as we get later into the evening, that's when the Carolinas become the point of interest. I appreciate that, Renita, but you don't have to worry. Like I said, I often do live streams as much as possible. I do enjoy getting to help people when the opportunity presents itself. So there's that. I do appreciate your generosity, though, of course. But you don't ever have to feel obligated to do it. I just want to make sure that you know. Alright, so I think that's it. We beat the goal of having the meteorology part of this done within the first hour. So if there's any questions that anyone has from this point, feel free to start shooting. Got a little bit of free time on my hands. And then if you want that story time about my experience through 2011, then I can do that also. Oh, you want Utah to get something? Oh yeah, we did say that I might take. I did say I was gonna try and take a look at Utah if it was at all possible. All right. Well, I don't know the best way to do this because can't imagine that GFS is gonna do a great job of picking up on Cape. I remember you saying Thursday. Was it? Was it Thursday? One week without power. Wow. All right. So, 2011, man, how could I ever forget 2011? That whole month of April was crazy. So, I was still in high school actually at the time. I was a sophomore or yeah, I was a sophomore. And I was just starting to get find access to like some of the weather models. I was actually using the Weather Channel because there was a point in time where they had the website set up to where you could look at upper air maps, and you could look 14 days in advance. So late March is when I started looking at like my first severe weather events, but I still wasn't really sure of what I was looking at. So as time went on, I started to kind of figure out what was what. The troughing, I was starting to figure out troughing. Then the events around April 11th in particular took shape. Yeah, I'm kind of young. I'm 30. But I remember looking at the events around April 11th, April 16th. I watched Alabama go through an event. I watched the Carolinas go through an event. I even remember Raleigh getting hit by a tornado. I think it was Sanford, North Carolina as well. I remember covering those events. Well, not covering them, but I remember looking at model data for the events. And it was starting to come together. And it was right around that time frame where I saw the first model runs for April 27th. Originally, and this is still, and it's crazy because this is still kind of a trend today with the weather models now, like especially as you go out into range, the dates always kind of vary, especially once you get past day 10, which would be about 240 hours. I remember seeing the trough for what would be the super outbreak. And I was looking at it, I saw winds at 100 knots. I was looking at it like, wait, what? What is that? Like, am I losing it? And a friend of mine who was also kind of into the weather at the time, his name was Ken. I showed it to him, and he just kind of looks at me like, dude, what is that? Like, we were trying to process just what the heck we were looking at. Yeah, that's true. April 27th is your birthday? Wow. That's crazy. But I remember looking at the weather model 2 weeks out on the 14-day range. And I was just thinking to myself, okay, that can't be right. Because I've seen some crazy model runs by that point already. Because, like I said, 2011 that year was just insane, especially the month of April. Like, it still holds a record for the most tornadoes within a single month, for obvious reasons. But what I remember most is I remember as we went further and further along, as I would get through my schoolwork, one of my teachers was really cool. Miss Poole was her name. And sometimes I'd look at the computer after class if it was available. So I would do that, and I would always look at the weather models from that point onward. And I kept looking at it, and it just kept maintaining. And if anything, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was just getting stronger. It was trending worse. So then I started thinking to myself, okay. So I started kind of doing, and this is still kind of how I do it to this day. I almost kind of look at approaching severe weather forecasts as like looking at a scatter plot in a way. So what I would do is if I see a trough that's moving in a direction something like this, right? It doesn't really matter as much the tilt orientation. It does. I mean, it does and it doesn't. But if I'm looking at a shear profile, if I'm seeing the trough kind of evolve and kind of do the little ski jump feature as we call it here, or like this, what I'm looking for at the low levels is winds to be coming from like the south heading up towards the north here. We're looking for a point of intersection. And usually when you start to see that, it's a really good sign of directional shear. So when I saw that, I started thinking, okay, so there's directional shear. And I said, there's another component I'm missing. A little later, I realized, okay, speed shear. 100 knots. Started getting access to those low-level jet, those LLJ maps, the low-level jet. Started seeing 60, 70 knots, and then that's when it kind of hit me. I think it was like maybe April 19th where I started thinking, oh shit. I was, yeah, excuse my French, but I just started thinking like, oh shit, this is bad. But the thing is, it was 8 days out, and I've seen models kind of bust off of that. But as time went on, it kept getting like stronger and stronger and stronger. So then I remember the weekend before, I went fishing with my dad. We had another strong storm system that it went through around that time as well. Hey, what's up, Fortech, ETG? We've been talking about severe weather, and now it's story time as well. Because somebody asked me what my experience was from April 27th. But fast forward a little bit here. I go fishing with my dad, and I remember when we went out that day, just from that last storm system, I could feel something in the air. And I'll never forget how strong the winds were blowing that day. I mean, we were getting winds on the backside of another trough here, kind of like what you would see on something like this. But you could feel it. Like the winds had vorticity, and there was a lot of spin in the atmosphere already at that point. I remember just seeing how fast the clouds were moving as a result of that LLJ, and I was just thinking to myself, man, this is really going to be something. Like when you just kind of feel it in your bones, like it kind of spooked me a little bit, if I'm being honest. My area wasn't a risk. I think we were in like a I don't think we were in the. I think we were like on the edge of being in a moderate risk. We were like right in the middle of slight and moderate. Nothing really came of it from my area. It was a little further towards the north where there was a few tornadoes. And then there was like one to my south in a small town called LaGrange, Georgia. So there was that. But on that day, like I remember we were just about finished with school, and I remember looking at the sky, seeing all the clouds beginning to form. I was a little nervous at the time, and it was right around the time where I got home, and that's when the Tuscaloosa tornado had happened, and I started watching the Weather Channel's coverage of the outbreak. Lo and behold, probably about an hour into that is when I see the Birmingham tornado. Later in the evening, Rainsville happened. Then after Rainsville, that storm dissipated, and then ultimately it produced the strongest tornado to ever hit Georgia, the Ringgold tornado. It had winds up to about 185. Oh yeah, James was a beast that day. I wish I could have watched his live coverage on the day of, but obviously I wasn't in his market. Clouds were moving so fast. We actually had some dry air aloft over towards my area, and I think that's why we got spared. I don't know why, but it seems like we tend to get a lot of dry air aloft over our areas, but it's saved our skin more times than I can count. But what I remember most is when the storms did go, they were so intense. There was so much lightning. I did actually end up going out with my mom, and I kind of looked at, and then we did get to take a look out there and see what was going on. I did have some footage. I did get some footage, but I lost the camera, unfortunately. So that's lost to the sands of time. But at one point, I could have swore I saw a lowering. I'm not entirely sure if I was seeing a tornado or not. But I remember seeing a lightning flash illuminate something. It was a dark mass. It was definite. There was definitely a rain shield there. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure there was something going on there. I wish I could look back at the film, but like I said, unfortunately, it's not here anymore. That camera got lost when we moved when I was 17. My first ever guitar cover also was on there, but yeah, I probably could do that. Then again, it's going to be kind of hard to tell considering how many tornadoes there were that day because Georgia still got quite a few, especially off towards the northwestern part of the state. Because I lived in a different area compared to where I do now. Oh, wow. Oh, your first one was in '08. Blades folded? Wow. That was pretty strong then. That had to be maybe 120 plus. Yeah, that was actually the time. Oh, that's another. That could be a story time for another day. Because Atlanta actually got hit by a tornado. And actually, my area had that supercell pass right over before it went tornadic. So there's that. But yeah, it's a little story time for you guys, though. That was part of my experience with April 27th. Nothing crazy happened towards my area, but we'll wait. But yeah, it was a pretty nerve wracking time. Definitely a sequence that I wouldn't forget. That along with 2008. But in any case, though, that's all I got for you guys. I guess we'll be live again tomorrow. Yeah, it was a nice little land spout, though. It was a cool experience. My first tornado was actually in 2000, though. I think I told the story once before. Oh, one other thing about April 2011, that was also the first time I failed on a forecast, too. Because I picked an area of interest towards Georgia, which was 80 miles to my south in a small town called Thomaston. Nothing ended up happening there. The big tornado that ended up happening in Ringgold was what I was trying to forecast. And I had it wrong. I was about 100 miles off. So, yeah. It's my first failure, too. So, hey. But I was a novice. I'm a little bit better now, I would say. Or at least I'd like to think that, but you never know. But in any case, though, that's all I got for you guys. For a Midwestern, you've been in a hurricane. That's interesting. But alright, guys, I gotta get ready for the rest of this week, and I still have to work in the midst of all of this, too. This is the work threads, by the way. Uh, Anyways, though, I appreciate you all being here. we'll probably do some live stream coverage after tomorrow's discussion. Because I think by tomorrow we might be in range of day 3 for Friday. So we'll get a look at where the marginal risk is. We won't get a look at the hazard types and their percentages yet, but things will be a little bit more clear, especially with day 6. So do a brief discussion and then live coverage to finish that out tomorrow. Oh, I will. Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely gonna talk about. Definitely gonna be talking in Discord. If anyone is interested in that discussion on Discord or joining our Discord server, just type. You usually would be just need to type in exclamation point Discord, and then it will send you a link to our server. And you click the link. If you already have a Discord account, it'll take you right to us. If not, though, you'll have to, of course, make a Discord account, and then yeah. Oops, I accidentally clicked that. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. But in any case, though, we'll talk on Discord further. Um, Go into voice chat in a couple minutes, and I will get into the details with that, with some of the observations I made just from this discussion here. But for the rest of you all, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Time Metalhead Weatherman out.
Do you want some? Do you want some? These Oreos look pretty good, don't they? Do you want some?